with the emergence of AI, and like I don't know how much you've seen this in the circles that you operate in, but we've seen some pretty immediate and dramatic impact from AI on things like business email compromise.
Mhm.
The squirrel waffles of the world, folks doing kind of mass campaigns, ingesting and using all of that data from those real emails to make very convincing spoofs and phishes that often will evade detection by even the most modern systems. I guess, what are your thoughts on how the insurance world will keep up with emerging trends like that? And I know you kind of answered this in a way, saying that we'll have to continue to evolve, but in particular in regards to AI and kind of this cyber hygiene mentality, what do you think kind of the initial takeaways or initial approach should look like for most folks that are first experiencing or hearing about this?
Yes, well, it's interesting how many people still aren't even aware of what Chat GPT is, let
Hmm.
alone its capabilities and the concerns that we have around potential compromise. So I think part of it is education, and we really do need people to understand how to be more vigilant. It's difficult when you have hundreds of emails coming in all the time,
Hmm.
but it is something that, from the PAM perspective, I think we have to be so careful about privilege escalation. That I think is going to be one of the key focuses for us, generally on it's likely someone's going to click on those links and it's not their fault, right? And I think part of what we have to do, and we talk about this a lot in cyber, is kind of the fault shamey thing that has a tendency to happen. I
Hmm.
think we have to be much more collectively community oriented around these things are going to happen because we can't, it's difficult to defend. And so if it's difficult to defend, what's the mitigation? What's the compensating control? And so I do think the focus has to shift a little bit to how are we managing privilege escalation, and so the PAM pieces of it, because we know now that stopping it at using those tools can stop those emails. They may just slip through. So I think that's a big part of it. And so when we focus on that, as opposed to your earlier statement of boiling the ocean, how do we specifically start to really put guardrails around those areas where we know we have to have compensating controls, and to be very specific about them, not from an insurance perspective, because specificity causes other things to go unguarded, but
Hmm.
how do we get specificity around, if we know that this is a particular risk, then how are organizations dealing with potential lateral movement as a reason or result of that intrusion?
Got it. So I guess let me just restate this back to you and make sure that I'm understanding you correctly. So what you're saying in effect is, rather than building essentially an understanding or kind of specific response to AI in particular, you see it as a better response both for organizations and insurers to, as an example, highlight the need for data control and
Mhm.
not entering sensitive or company or customer data into a generative AI like ChatGPT, rather than saying, oh, you must have a generative AI defense that meets these requirements and does this thing and has these bells and whistles. Is that accurate?
Yes, I mean, when we have those, I mean, certainly, but we know this, that it will evolve, right? And
Hmm.
so we go back to the fundamentals conversation, and fundamentals can take us a certain distance, especially as we're all figuring out how to mitigate against those risks and for implementation of those tools, because we know that implementation takes time, understanding the effectiveness, all the things that go into the way that the adversary can rapidly adjust to the new capabilities, whereas we have to figure out, how does that fit into our system? How do we implement it? Who gets it? All those questions that happen for organizations large and small. So we know that there's some part of it we can rest on fundamentals, and that those fundamentals allow us then to create building blocks once we have the tools available to us that we know will be effective in creating solutions. And also we know that some of, like, email vendors who are already filtering for those types of incidents can accelerate their capabilities. But in the meantime, or in addition to, right, I think we know that certain functions will still be effective. And the segmentation one, Pam, just the basic ones that we talk about a lot in these discussions, will still bear fruit, I think, in the respect of creating those mitigations, or at least compensating controls.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think as an outcome, it's more relevant a discussion to say, okay, well, while the defense tooling industry is catching up and figuring out where to integrate things like generative AI or quantum computing or whatever the next kind of major technical innovation might look like, those basic hygienes combined with awareness that those things exist, right? And just having a conversation of, okay, well, how does this impact our risks? Are there any scenarios that involve these technologies or things that we need to solve for? And that's a conversation you can have absent any specific technical solution or silver bullet, as it were, for that particular like AI or generative AI as a general concept or example. Those kind of related threats.
It's true. And I was just reading not long ago that, there are still 0 days being exploited every day. There were 55 in the last week. Right? And so, there's always going to be something, and the always something. And of course I think there's a little bit of FUD around some of those things, because we also know that 0 days are more effectively exploited if your systems aren't patched. And, so again, I mean, it always kind of comes back to the same root of this conversation. And so I think we will all continue to evolve, but we also have to somewhat accept that we're going to be a couple steps behind, because our sole mission in life as companies isn't necessarily just to create these boundaries to protect our organizations. We're running companies, and so the mission statement of what we do is different than what they do, and so part of it is, I think, accepting that we will be a little bit behind.